This is the Capitol building, not the capital of the United States in Washington, D.C. This is the Capitol building of Tennessee. And while some people think that people coming into the Capitol building is some kind of act of domestic terrorism, no, this is our building. It belongs to us, the people, and the people that work here and make the laws, they work for us. Now, every year or so, we come to the Capitol building and we're involved in the legislative process in some ways. Generally, we make a YouTube video. That YouTube video then, for whatever reason, doesn't get very many views. That's actually okay, because what we've been trying to do politically, with our political newsletter, with the lobbying on the Hill, with being involved in local politics, that doesn't depend on YouTube, which is good. There's a lot of things that we've been able to accomplish, and the good news is you can do it too. Now, as we've continued to work and as we've continued to write political newsletters and people have signed up for them, we've been getting questions as to like, how do you actually get involved? How do you actually get started? And one of the questions that's pretty common is, not just how do I get started, but how does the process work? How do I get involved in the process if I don't really know how the process works? So, given that there's a bunch of stuff happening right now, technically we are on the Hill for Lobby Day, something that's organized by Gun Owners of America and TFA, and there are a bunch of folks who are lobbying right now, talking to the representatives, providing testimony inside of subcommittees and committees, and a lot of these bills probably going to pass this year. Some of these bills probably not going to pass this year. Until the dust settles, it's hard to know exactly what this year will have accomplished. So we're going to talk about the process. How exactly does a bill become a law? There's other videos and songs about this, but we're going to talk about this specifically as it relates to Tennessee, because that's where we are, specifically as it relates to local, state-level organizations, and specifically as it relates to Second Amendment bills, because those are the ones that T.Rex is interested in, and those are the ones that we're working on right now on the Hill today. And make no mistake, not only are these facilities the property of the people, and not only do your representatives need to represent you, you actually do have the capability to do a lot of stuff in this process. So as we talk about how you get involved and how the process works, I want you to understand you don't have to have a holster manufacturing company, you don't have to have a legal degree, you don't have to have a YouTube channel. All you have to do is have an understanding of how you can help representatives who are principled and actually want to do the right thing, do the right thing. So one question that a lot of people ask is, where does legislation come from? It doesn't come out of just thin air. It has to come from a representative or someone who just has an idea. It could come from you. It could come from me. It could come from literally anybody. You could walk into anybody's office, like this one here, sit down and present them with some legislation. Now, it's helpful if you already have a reputation and a relationship with this guy, because as you present him with legislation, you got to remember this is a guy who spent a lot of time and effort to be here, and he probably has some ideas of his own. Okay, that's not always true. But if you are talking to a principled representative who actually wants to fix things and get things done, yeah, he has his own bills that he wants to run, and there's a limited amount of legislation that he actually can run, that he can carry and spend time with to actually push through the process to make it to a law. But if you know him, you already have a relationship with him, you know the stuff that he cares about, you have some credibility, and you can bring him a bill and you can say, you want to do Second Amendment stuff? Here's a way that we could do some Second Amendment stuff. I've been doing the research. Here's some talking points. We would help you with this. And then you hand it to him, and it's well on its way to the very beginning step of starting to be possibly legislation. So this is the desk of Representative Clay Doggett, and if I bring him a bill, say, hypothetically, that he likes and he wants to pick it up and run with it, he has a couple of things that he has to do. One thing is he has to meet the filing deadline. So the way that his job works is this is a part-time job, believe it or not. In every state, it's a little bit different, but in Tennessee, session starts in January, and all the bills need to be filed by end of January or sometime in February. It kind of varies year to year. And so he's got to be able to have a bill with legal language that is good and ready to go, filed, and talking points and an idea of what he wants to do with it pretty early on. The earlier, the better. The earlier you're talking to him about these things, the better. And once you have a representative on board, another thing that you have to have is you need to get a senator on board so that this bill, which is a House bill, can run through the House, and there will be a companion bill that will run through the Senate. They can both get voted on and both become law. That's only the beginning though, because there's actually a very involved process of getting a bill turned into legislation, which I have mixed feelings about. On the one hand, I don't want it to be easy to pass legislation. On the other hand, the process that it goes through has a bunch of speed bumps in it that make it very difficult for outsiders, people who don't have a full-time capability to focus on this stuff, to really keep up with. And so it is really important that you start to get involved in this with an understanding that it is going to take some time. It is going to take some effort. It is going to take a little bit of attention to understand exactly what it is that you're going to have to be doing to get legislation passed in your own state. And you need to find some people to work with. You need a representative, obviously. You need a senator, but you're also going to need some folks to help you with some of this procedural stuff, even though ultimately it's not that complicated. All you got to do is get that bill, and then you're on to the next step of the process. Now, there's another issue that needs to happen before a bill moves on to committee, and that is that it needs to go get basically legal approval. There's a bunch of lawyers, I think they keep them in the basement, and one of the things that they do is they examine bills to make sure that the language in the bill is actually proper legal vocabulary and it actually does what it's supposed to do. And they do that. They will work with any of the legislators in order to get their bills shaped up, but sometimes it's handy to have your own lawyer take a look at it, make sure that it still does what you want. And then the second thing is there's a fiscal review that's done by some accountants, which I think they keep in the attic. And so if somebody were to put a bill forward that says that because of rising gas prices, Tennessee is going to buy a Tesla for every Tennessee citizen, those guys would come back and say the price tag on this bill, the fiscal note attached to this bill is like $300 billion. And then that would basically kill the bill. Nobody wants to vote for a bill that costs $300 billion. Now, after a bill is filed, the first place that it comes to is a subcommittee. A subcommittee is not that many other representatives, and they hear all the bills that are in a certain category. Now, I can't actually remember how many subcommittees are, so we're going to put the titles up right here. And this is a place where all the bills get heard and discussed long before they go before the entire House of Representatives. Because with the number of representatives that exist and the number of bills that they are allowed to file, there's no way for the entire House of Representatives to talk about every single bill. So the subcommittee hears the bills, makes minor amendments, and then a very small number of people pass that bill out of committee. And this is where a lot of bills die. A lot of bills never make it out of committee. They never actually have the votes to get out of this very small number of people who decide whether the bill lives or dies. And you could argue that all of this conversation, this getting support for a bill so that a committee of this many people is able to vote it out to the next step, should be relatively easy. And I agree with you, but I also like that some of this procedure happens publicly. There's an opportunity for members of the public to stand up and provide testimony before this group of people, and it all happens very publicly. There's also chairs for members of the public to come in and watch what is happening. And a lot of times there are supporters of bills that come in and they are present for the deliberations. And there are cameras that cover this discussion going on. It is saved, it can be viewed later, it's a matter of public record.
My name is David Botkin. I work in the firearms industry, but this is an area of concern for me that long predates that. I think it's a really good move, and of the 18 states that have constitutional carry right now, a lot of them have not had their governor on board with the push to make that law.
And the opportunity that you have as a private citizen to come into this subcommittee, stand up at that podium, and tell the people why this is a good bill and why it should be passed, that's actually extremely important. And the opportunity for you to bring people to sit in these chairs so that the people who vote yes or no on bills will be looking them in the eye when it happens, that also should not be underestimated. After all, Mike Bloomberg pays a whole lot of people to come into committee rooms and subcommittee rooms like this wearing Moms Demand Action t-shirts because it has an effect. And then, if a bill makes it out of the subcommittee, it comes here. It comes into a full committee, which as you can see is a much larger room. It holds a lot more members of the public. And I should probably say it's not just members of the public, it's also other lobbyists, the staff members of the people who are on the committee, sometimes media and reporters, oftentimes there's cameramen in the back. But as you can see, there's a much larger group of representatives or senators that will sit in a room like this and listen to a bill, the pros and the cons, the benefits, the costs of a bill. And more people are brought in to, again, provide testimony for the support of a bill. These would be people who will be affected by the bill, people who were damaged by the bill not being in place earlier, that kind of thing. And again, it's all public. There are cameras, there's an opportunity for the public to be here watching, an opportunity for the public to speak in support of bills, and this is the last chance that a bill has to live or die before it goes to the floor, before it actually gets voted on by the entire body, the entire assembly, and become a law. Now, I'm going to keep talking about committees for a little bit because committees are a place that don't get as much attention. And so committees are a place where there's actually tremendous opportunity for people to somewhat shadily kill a bill. Oftentimes there are shenanigans that happen in committees and subcommittees to get rid of a bill that politicians don't want, but they don't want to be seen in opposition of. So for example, this is how committees generally vote on bills.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. No. Bill fails.
It's much better when committees have a roll call vote so that we can keep track of exactly who voted which way. So this is an area that needs a special amount of scrutiny. And again, the opportunity for you to keep an eye on what is actually being said about bills, how people are actually scheduling or not scheduling bills. In some ways, that is far more important to the success of a bill, whether or not it's actually going to become a law, than the way that they vote eventually on the floor. And again, the opportunity to provide public testimony directly to this committee and the members that are on it, that's huge. So today in Tennessee, we have a bill, House Bill 1735. It hasn't actually been heard by the Senate yet, but in the House, it is currently before a committee. And there is going to be testimony from people, regular, everyday Tennesseans, who believe that lowering the age that a person can carry a firearm from the age of 21 down to the age of 18. Now, obviously, at T.Rex Arms, we think this is a huge thing. This is a freedom that everybody should have. So that's what we're going to hear today.
House Bill 1735, sir.
Thank you, sir. And what this does is this particular bill lowers the age for our citizens, our law-abiding citizens, to carry a handgun, lowers it from 21 to 18, and this puts it in the same position age-wise as the ability to vote and also serve in the military. And I know we have some folks here to testify today, and if you'll entertain that.
Next on the list, I have James Fry. James, are you here? You're more welcome to stand at the podium. If you want to sit down, just make sure your red light's on, introduce yourself, and you'll have 3 minutes as well.
My name is James Fry. I'm here to testify on behalf of HB 1735. I'm 18 years old, and I would like to explain why it's important to me personally that this bill passes. The law deems me old enough to fight, kill, and die for my country, and train with taxpayer dollars to use full-auto firearms to kill on behalf of our government. Yet I am not allowed to carry a handgun for my own protection. I want to say that I have been threatened with a weapon before. While assisting on a political campaign, a gun was drawn on me and my friends. I was staring down the barrel of a gun, and if that man had decided to begin shooting, I would have been helpless. I called the police, and at least 10 minutes later, it was at least 10 minutes till they got there. That would have been far too late should he have decided to pull the trigger. I'm old enough to vote, old enough to drive, old enough to defend our country, and I need the right to defend myself as well. Other states, such as Indiana, allow 18 to 20-year-olds to carry firearms and have not had problems with it. I'm asking for the right to defend my life against a murder or very real threats if no other help is available in time. I'd like to encourage you to vote yes on HB 1735. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Well done.
Yes,
Members,
sir.
do we have any questions for Mr. Fry? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Representative Todd, you're recognized on the bill as amended. I know we had a lot of discussion on this.
I'd like to request a roll call vote on this bill.
Procedurally, it would need to have been requested by the sponsor in the beginning, or it can be requested by a member of this committee, but just have to have three hands showing that. So we've gotten two. I see three. All right, members. Madam Clerk, go ahead and take that vote for us. There was three hands, roll calls requested, and we're going to take a vote.
Representative Bricken? Bricken votes aye. Representative Clemens?
I'll be honest, I did not actually think that this bill had much of a chance this year, not even in this committee. But between the testimony and the T-shirts and the insistence on a roll call vote,
9 ayes and 6 noes.
Very good. Bill passes and moves on to finance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman of the committee.
and so against all odds, HB 1735 is on its way to the House floor, where it's one step closer to becoming law. So now all the representatives can discuss the bill together. And theoretically, after getting through subcommittee and getting through committee, all of the issues have been ironed out. People can see that their colleagues from both sides of the aisle have had a chance to introduce amendments and stuff like that. And it enables the actual conversation and vote to theoretically be a more streamlined process. And it kind of hopefully helps the cream of the crop to rise to the top. All the bills that are the most important, the most pressing, whatever the criteria is, make it to the House floor where they're voted on by everybody. A record is kept of exactly how everybody voted. And then they move on to actually becoming law, which essentially just involves the Speaker of the House will sign all the bills that are passed in this side. Over on the Senate side, the Speaker of the Senate will sign all the bills that are passed by the Senate. Then they give those to the governor, and the governor signs those. So not a whole lot of bills actually make it this far. A lot of stuff obviously is killed in subcommittee, killed in committee. A lot of stuff just through procedure and through calendaring and through scheduling doesn't actually make it to this floor. But by the time that it does make it to the floor, the opportunities to kill a bill on the House floor aren't quite as many as in the previous steps. And all of this is done very publicly again on camera, and votes are recorded. We got a digital vote system here in Tennessee where people vote with push buttons, and the votes are counted up on that LED screen down there. So it's much easier to keep people on record and to hold them accountable for the way that they voted on certain bills at this stage in the game. But again, that is something that you have to do. Which ultimately brings us back here to the office of the individual representative. Even though there's a ton of shenanigans that could potentially go on, even though there's a lot of procedure, a lot of red tape, a whole lot of stuff that you need to figure out in order to get some of this stuff done, it ultimately comes back to those individual representatives. So on the internet, it is really easy for us to be cynical. It is really easy for us to be frustrated. It's really easy for us to say voting doesn't really matter. Just vote harder and nothing will change. And 90% of the time I agree with that, especially after I've spent a day in the Capitol, believe it or not. But it depends on how you're voting. If all you're doing is voting for whoever's on the ticket, yeah, not much is going to be accomplished. But if you can actually have some input into the person who sits in this chair, then it does matter. If you actually have a relationship with this representative before he is elected, if you actually send the right people to represent you, then you have a shot at changing a lot of different things. Because ballots don't really do anything on their own. In the same way that all of the accountability that you saw in the process, that doesn't do anything by itself. Those chairs that allow the public to watch what is being done in this building don't do anything if people don't come and sit in those. Not even the Constitution of Tennessee or the Constitution of the United States stops people from doing what is wrong, doing what is not allowed in those constitutions. The people have to really stand up and provide the level of restraint to the government, because it will not restrain itself. And that accountability that needs to be brought to state legislatures, representatives, subcommittees, and committees has to be done by us, by you. Obviously, this is a very Tennessee-centered video. But the good news is, if you live in the United States, you live in a state that has a state house just like that one. And again, that state house belongs to you. The representatives that you send to that state house represent you. And the responsibility to make sure that they actually do that and do that well is yours. So I got good news and bad news. The bad news is it's pretty late for you to be involved in any of the legislative stuff that is happening in 2022. Even a bunch of the bills that you saw us work on today, felt like a little bit, maybe a little too late. I don't anticipate that all of those bills are going to become law this year. The good news is that now is actually the perfect time to begin developing the candidates that you want to send to your state houses in these midterm elections. And it doesn't start with you doing the last minute political lobbying type stuff that T.Rex generally does because we're disorganized. It starts with you building those relationships with the people that you trust to go to that building that belongs to you, to represent you, because that is your responsibility. So now is when you start to work on 2022. Now is when you start to find the right people. Now is when you start to look for bills that you want to run next year. So if you live in Tennessee, you're going to see us on the Hill continuing to do this. If you live in other states, I really want to see you guys working in your own state houses, making sure that the people that you send there are upholding the constitutions, the state constitutions that they swear to uphold.